All right, Lakewood Business Ministry family. We got a brother in the house. He needs no introduction. Joel Malm is with us today. What's up, bro?
Hey, good to be with you, man.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, you don't need an introduction. This is family, man. Like you are an integral part of the business ministry at Lakewood Church. And we're so grateful for you to take this time, knowing how busy you are, to be able to just connect with us and help some of our, the entrepreneurs that will be listening to this grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good, good, good. So it's been a while, COVID, all of that. Just before we jump into the questions, bring us up to date on all that you've been doing. Like, what have you been up to?
Well, kind of one of the primary drives of what I do is I help people find their calling through outdoor adventure and personal coaching.
Mm.
And over the last year, obviously, the adventure side of things, most of the places I go have been closed. Peru has been
Mm-hmm.
closed, so
Mm-hmm.
it kind of forced me into the writing world, and
Mm.
which I love writing. Actually, let's say this: I don't love writing; I love having written.
Oh, okay.
So I
That,
like,
yeah.
so last year I wrote two books,
Mm.
which was pretty fun. One was kind of a fiction book about a guy that hikes the trail to Machu Picchu. Since I couldn't hike it, I was like, well, we'll write a book about a guy that
Book
does.
about it.
That was called Guided by Thunder. And then I wrote the book behind me, Love Slows Down. And so I've been doing a lot of, radio interviews. With that, also my dad and I had launched a podcast just prior to COVID. And so we
Mm.
spent the year kind of honing that in and getting our voicing down on that. So I've been doing the podcast, doing a lot of speaking is actually ramping back up now that as things are opening up again.
Mhm.
I visited a lot of conferences online,
Yeah, virtual.
pre-recorded stuff. And so just doing a lot of speaking, writing, and then the outdoor adventures actually, uh, Lord willing, as the Lord seems to be opening the door, we'll be back in Peru in about just a few weeks from now. So
Wow.
it's kind of all ramping back up, but this last year really forced me to focus on the writing and kind of the communication element of what I do.
So interesting how you took a different perspective to it, right? It wasn't like, oh, I have to go hiking. That's what I do. Like, okay, what can I do within this time and be productive? So you touched that hiking piece, the adventure, not just hiking, the adventure thing
Yeah.
that you do with summit leaders, right?
Mhm.
And just help entrepreneurs that probably haven't heard that, or people that would really love to know, share the inspiration and motivation which led you to launching and growing Summit Leaders?
Yeah. So for years right after college, I started leading backpacking teams on 4-month trips around the world.
Mm.
And when I got my master's degree and I got married about the same time, I realized the 4-month thing just wouldn't work. So I had to regroup. It seems to be a theme here in my life is regroup. So I got this master's degree in counseling, and all of a sudden, after doing the internship, you have to do like 1,000-hour internship. I was like, I don't actually like clinical counseling. I'm don't get me wrong. I think everybody should go through clinical counseling, but for me, I'm like, I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
So like, well, I've got this master's degree, and everybody's like, well, you can do this, or this. I'm like, well, I don't like any of those things. So what do I do? And this is what I found with entrepreneurs a lot of times is,
Mm.
if you listen to what people tell you you can do with what you've got, you'll never create something original. So I realized, well, what do I love doing? I realized I love doing outdoor adventure. So I started doing outdoor adventure, and I realized that's the counseling I do. The
Wow.
formula for what we do is
Yeah.
change of pace plus change of place
Mm.
equals change of perspective. That's something my friend Mark Batterson came up with. And I'm like, well, that's what
Wow.
counseling is in some
Yeah.
ways, but we
Mm.
do it in the outdoor context. So it's really what I felt called to do, but it's in the context that God had uniquely created for me.
Mm.
That's what I tell entrepreneurs all the time. Figure out the drive behind what you love, but don't
Mhm.
get stuck in the box of what people say it has to look like. Because,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that have good intentions, but they don't know your unique calling, and
Yeah.
you've got a special, unique thing. So figure out what is the drive. And the drive was, I wanted to help people get perspective on their life and get a view
Mm.
for what God thinks of them and what they can be and the adventure he's called them to.
Mm.
And it just wasn't working for me having somebody sit on a couch in front of me. So
Wow.
that's how
Wow.
Summit Leaders started.
Wow, that is amazing. So again, well, it's that regrouping is not bad, you know. It's you stepping back and looking, assessing the situation instead of just going headstrong, like it must be this, it must be this, you know, taking that. And there's this great book that I love, Master of One by Jordan
Mm.
Reynolds. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that was a constant theme about me and the Business Life group I'm a part of. We're actually reading it right now. He was talking about how you have to step back, you know, access and figure out, and how your gifts and your talents have to now be married in opportunity. So those three come together, and then you have a great vocational that you can use to glorify God. Also, we have this team for the business ministry for this second quarter of 2021, plant, cultivate, grow. In line with that, thinking about that concept, in your business, how have you successfully integrated your faith in business to align with those concepts of planting, cultivating, and growing?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that as a great question. And the first
Mm,
thing that came to my mind was Mark 4, where Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like a man, he plants seed on the ground, and then he sleeps and he rises and he sleeps and he rises, and the seed is growing. And he doesn't know why, he doesn't know how, it grows. And then all of a sudden it says it starts the blade, then the ear, then the full grain. And then he says, and then you got to reap that harvest because the harvest is ready. And I thought,
mm,
seeds I planted 10 years ago, I'm just now starting to take fruit in the business side of things. The writing, the outdoor adventures, all of that.
mm,
But it was stuff I did 10 years ago. And
mm,
I mean, just really practical things, building an email list.
mm.
Uh, and you say, well, that's just common sense. Well, it's a principle that God put into place. Stephen Covey calls it the law of the farm.
Mm,
If you plant seeds and hang around long enough, you're going to get to reap the benefits of those seeds. You may
mm,
even be able to sit under the shade of an oak tree you planted if you stick around long enough. But so many
mm.
times we plant a seed and we're like, it's not growing. Well, it takes time for big stuff to grow.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've realized that I would get really impatient, in the first 3 or 4 years of doing this. And I'm like, when am I going to see the harvest? And it's funny.
Mm,
Just now I'm starting to see the stuff that 10 years ago I wanted. So I would say one of the biggest keys for me is being my faith. God is always about the long game.
mm,
He's like, what I'm accomplishing in you, he who began a good work in you, he's going to be faithful to complete it.
mm,
You got to stay in the fight though,
mhm.
because so many times it's not happening fast enough. And you say, well, you just planted the seeds essentially yesterday. I have some friends that they're just really starting to see some success, and everybody's like, you're an overnight success story. And they go, yeah, a 14-year overnight success story. So there are no overnight success stories. And I
Yes,
think that's one of
yes,
the things that for me has just, God's been hammering back into me is you plant the seeds and then you
mhm.
tend to them and you
Yes,
stick around. Like
yes,
in Mark 4, it says, and all of a sudden the harvest is going to come.
yes,
And then you better get ready when that harvest comes, because it's time
yes,
that you got to take the harvest in.
yes.
But there's been a lot of lead up to it. So I would say that's been a key with the faithful element of staying in the game.
Mhm.
And, God's going to do his part,
Yes,
but you're also called to tend the seeds that you've planted. First of all, plant the seeds and
yes.
then tend to those seeds.
Wow. Wow. That is so good. Because, again, so many nuggets in there. God is about the long game. Like, look at the story of our salvation, like, the story of Christ. God is about the long game. Everybody's sitting there thinking this is over. And he's like, y'all don't know. Give me 3 days. Watch what's about to happen. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So he's about that long game for sure. And
That's
then,
another key thing. I think here's the thing that I realized. We overestimate what can happen in a year,
mm,
and we underestimate what can happen in 5 years. And so we're all thinking, well, where am I going to be a year from now? And God's saying, hey, if you'll give it 5 years, you'll be blown away. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has perceived what God has in store for you. But again, it's the long game. And we're microwave people. We want it cooked in a minute. And I heard a guy say one time, I love this guy, the black pastor, and he goes, there are no microwaves in God's kitchen. There are only crock pots. I was like, that is powerful. It's
yes,
it's a
yes.
slow cook, man.
And again, with the current age we're in, instant gratification. You post the picture instantly, you're getting 20 likes, you're getting comments. It's like, yeah, that rush is coming. And then when you do something, like you start writing a blog, you have an email list and you write a blog, nobody comments. You write a blog, no, and then you're like, well, nobody's commenting on this. I shouldn't do this. But also it brings into perspective, right? Or it brings into mind the fact that we are walking as unto the Lord, right? We're not really walking like, oh, I'm walking to get this particular accolade. I'm walking to for these people to look at me like this. When God is your focus, then yeah, you just continue on that path as long as you stay. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good.
The results are up to him. Yeah.
Come on. You just do your part. That's it. Plant the seed and tend to it. That's it. That's it. That's it. Love it. So we talked about how you came about Summit Leaders, right? But that's been how many years been in business now? 15, you said?
Yeah, almost 15.
Wow, wow. Help our viewers and listeners understand, like, how have you been able to cultivate that vision that you got? You're being led to that, okay, this is the calling God had for you, right? With Summit Leaders, and the growth strategy as well that led you to expanding those services now beyond outdoor leadership training expeditions, because you offer other services within Summit Leaders, right?
Yeah. It's been a natural progression. And if you talk to anybody that's been a success, what the vision ends up being is not necessarily what they thought it would be at the start. But what you do is you look for the opportunities that God presents along the way. I'm convinced, listen, God's plan for you is what you would want your plan to be if you knew all the details. The reason he's going to give the details is because you would be scared out of your mind. If he showed you, you'd be like, no, what? And if he gave you the final thing, you'd try and take shortcuts because I know you and you know me. We're shortcut people. So he's like, there's this process and I'm going to build on it. And so I started with the outdoor adventures, and then I'd have people come to me and say, hey man, I just spent 6 months preparing physically to go on this outdoor adventure. Do you have anything equivalent, like a 6-month training mentorship program that we could do? And I was like, yeah, well, I can make one. So I made one. And that's how the coaching started. That took off and expanded like I never would have imagined.
Wow.
Even with people that never would go on a hike with me, they would want to do the coaching. And then from there, of course, I got to a point, there was the 6th month of the program. I was like, there's not a book that says what I want to say about vision. There's some good ones out there, but I want a simple one. So I wrote a book. Well, it happened that book got published. That book gets published. People read the book. They call, there it is right there. They call and they're like, hey, would you come talk to us about this concept? Okay. Yeah. So then all of a sudden I'm in the speaking world, and then I'm in the speaking world. And then people are like, well, do you put out a regular thing? Well, I guess I better get a newsletter. So I start a newsletter. Every Monday, something goes out that builds my email list. So it all built on it. And honestly, if I would have known everything that would be required at the start, I probably never would have jumped in the pool. But that's why God's like, well, just dip your toe in, man. So that's where I think most of us, and that's what I believe spirit-led leadership is in business. You look for the opportunities that God's putting in front of you, because God is always at work in the world around you. You don't have to come up with stuff to do for God. You just got to see where he's already working and then figure out where he's asking you to plug in with that. And when you do that, you come out looking really good. And people are like, wow, you're so amazing. Well, I just kind of stepped into what God was doing. But that's the beauty of it. And that's where John Piper says, he's like, when God gets the glory, we get the joy. When God shows, hey, look what I can do through somebody like you, you're all like, wow, this is amazing. But God obviously is glorified because they let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And that's what's happening with that.
Hallelujah. Yes, brother. Yes, man. We were created to be his representative here. So there, like you just said, everything that he intends to do, he's not going to come and do it. It is up to us that he's waiting on us, the ideas that he's giving us. And that's why it's so important, right? This podcast and this ministry, that intersection of faith and business, because most times with the marketplace, we call ourselves marketplace missionaries or marketplace ministry, right? We sometimes think that with this part of our life, it shouldn't be so spiritual, but no, this is where we're supposed to even be more spiritual than anything else.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I hear people a lot of times they separate it out and they're like, well, it's just business. And this is just, I'm like, no, that's not going to go well for you.
Oh my goodness. So I want to touch on vision map, brother. Like, yeah, this book right here. Woo. You were the first person that taught me about having a red pen and a black pen. The black pen is, okay, Remy, this is you. The red pen is God, right?
Yep. What are
Bro,
you going to do? Write that in black. And what can only
yes.
God do? You write that in red.
Yeah. And that blessed me because you know why? Most times that obstacle is when you start listing it, you get to the parts that you don't really know. And it's like, maybe you've listed 7 things you can do. Then you get to 2 things that you can't. Okay, you skip those and you try again, but you're finding so much that you can't and you just give up. But it made it clear for me, like, still list them. Write the vision down, but now turn it around. The one that you can do, that's where you tap in him as a partner, right? Okay, this is you. Here you go. You take care of this. And when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's yours. In your prayer time, I've written it for you, right? This is yours. It has your name on it. Yeah, that was so good. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for writing that book, man. That was your first book?
The first one. And the reason I wrote it, again, talk about regrouping, is we had 6 months of a program. I got the program started without the end figured out. And then I'm like, what book are we going to use? We had used some Andy Stanley material, some Joel Osteen material, I think. It's several other books. But there wasn't a book that was said the way I wanted to say it. So I wrote the little thing and that got published. So it's, again, the small steps.
Yeah.
And you see the need, you meet the need, and then God multiplies your work, the planting the seeds.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm one of the people that has blessed, so I'm grateful.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you've talked about how Summit Leaders, you use coaching and those outdoor adventures to, like, inspire vision and purpose. And of course, hey, you wrote the book. So help our listeners and viewers understand, why are vision and purpose essential to personal and professional success?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is that when you don't have a clear vision, you don't know what to say no to. And, I believe that in general, God's promises are God says God's promises are yes and amen. God is a yes God. If you think about when he put us in the Garden of Eden, it was like yes to everything, no to one small thing. Yeah. And when you've got a clear vision, you know what to say no to, and you can say it definitively because you're like, that doesn't fit in with the vision. It's like with a kid. My dad always taught, when you're raising kids, he said, you need to let your default answer be yes, unless you have a very clear answer for no. And when you have a really important reason for no, you explain the vision why to your child. No, we're not going to participate in those kind of things as a family because those kind of things can lead to this and this and this. And we don't believe in that. And so when you do that, you're infusing vision into people. And so when you're leading an organization, when you're leading yourself, one of the biggest things you got to figure out is, because we live in this world where it's just we're constantly getting, I compare it, and when I'm hiking, they come with these huge backpacks on. And I'm like, you can't carry all that for a 40-mile hike. But I need it all. But no, you don't. So I start pulling stuff out of their bag and they're like freaking out. But later they go, thank you for pulling all that out of my bag. We naturally just add to our backpack, and we wake up one morning and go, dude, I'm tired and can't carry all this anymore. And then the hike's not even done yet. So what I talk about is you've got to know what to leave out and what to say no. And the most important, the best way to do that, Proverbs 29:18, the verse we all love, where there is no vision, it says, the people dwell without restraint. And that just means you're just saying yes to everything. So you're just throwing it in your back. I might need this. But when you know where you're going and where you're to go, you know what to say no to. And that's one of the biggest things. You see that with organizations. A lot of times what gets them in trouble is what's called mission drift. Yeah. They set out with a very clear purpose to do something, and then they go, oh, we should do this too. And that one small thing takes them down. Yeah. You see so many organizations, they get into this business over here, and that business is not what they were made to do. Yeah. And all of a sudden that branch of their business is what takes them down. So you have laser focus on the vision. And when you've got a laser focus, clear vision, you know what to say no to. Yeah. And of course, you know what to say yes to.
Yes to. That is so good. That is so good, because when it's kind of like having scattered brain, and you see, I don't know what your thoughts are about this concept of multitasking. I think it is the worst thing that's happened to humanity because all you're doing is um, moving a millimeter in a million ways, as
Yeah.
Jordan Reynolds puts it. Yeah, like if you stay laser focused on, okay, this is where I'm headed, then okay, if you see resources, and I'm in the IT industry, I see that all the time where, oh, this is the latest thing happening. Oh, this is trending. Well, that does not bother. Like, okay, yeah, this is the latest job. If you get into this category, you're making six figures guaranteed. Oh, they are employing, even recruiters will reach out like, dude, hey, you could just spend 6 weeks to pick this up and you'll be doing good. I'm like, but it doesn't really relate to where I'm headed, though. Because it's not going to do nothing for me. I'm trying to master this one thing, not just be everywhere.
Yeah.
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 You want to be the Mississippi River, deep and
Hmm.
forceful instead of a bunch of little streams that kind of trickle out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the Mississippi River. That's going to be my response next time.
That's right.
So, in all these years now of Summit Leaders, right, about 15 years, can you share a story or two about how your clients have experienced either personal or professional transformation through the seeds that you've been instrumental in planting in their lives?
Yeah. I mean, I've had people, it's interesting because, like you mentioned the book.
Mhm.
I didn't know you'd read Vision Map, but you said it was impacting. That's one of the powerful things about creating content like that
Mhm.
is your people are taking you home with them and it's having an impact you may never hear about. Talk about planting seeds, right? But I've had some very specific things where I've worked with guys. I had one guy join my coaching program. He was like, I know I'm supposed to join, but I don't know what we're going to do. And
Wow.
after working it out for about 4 months, we realized he was called to write a book and he actually got a 3-book contract, um, using his specific gifting as an artist to write a book about end times concepts, eschatology. And it was kind of
Wow.
cool. I was like, wow, he discovered this and ended up getting multiple books from it. I've had other people that have started ministries from what we've talked through. One of
Wow.
my main things in my coaching is figuring out what's your message.
Mhm.
And when you figure out your message, you've also figured out what problem you're uniquely equipped to solve, which is really what makes a business successful. Is what's the problem you're going to solve for people. But you've got to have your message, your drive behind that. And once you know that, it's the natural thing that's flowing out of you anyways. It's not like you're gonna have to drum up energy to do it. It's what's going to flow out of you anyways. And that's going to create longevity because you go, yeah, I already love doing this. I don't get
Yeah.
tired of doing it. I don't have to
Yeah.
create energy for it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I drive people to. Like, what are you already doing well? What is your life already, God has already prepared you. We're his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which the Father himself prepared beforehand that
Yes.
we should walk in them. What that means is when it comes time for you to do the work he's calling you to do, you may feel unqualified, but know this, he's prepared you for
Yes.
it. And
Amen.
go in with humility, but he's prepared it beforehand. So
Yeah.
what's the story God's already been writing and what's the next natural step?
Mm.
That's where we see. So some people write books, some people start
Mm.
ministries. I've started helps people start outdoor adventure stuff.
Mm.
One girl got her dream job with this like
Wow.
big business guru. And so
Wow.
all sorts of different things.
That is so amazing. So, in a nutshell, you just help unlock that which is already in them that they've been trying to like, okay, figure out.
Yeah, I mean, God's already been writing a story with your life. So what's the next natural chapter?
That's so good, brother. Thank you so much. So, as we start wrapping up here, you've been in the marketplace for a minute. You've written books, and you've tried something and it didn't work out, and then you had to pivot. Like that whole stepping back and switching. What resources or practical steps would you recommend for listeners to ensure they remain focused or rooted in God's plan for their business?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is figure out who you're going to be, not what you're going to do, because what you're going to do will change. Look at me.
Come
Like,
on,
what?
come
I
on, come
did not
on.
plan to be a writer. School was not a strong point for me at all. None of it. Uh, I was a mediocre student at best. I was probably least likely to succeed. I would have been voted. So if you looked at grades,
Yeah.
but who would have thought I'd write, well, I'm up on the fifth book will be out next year. Was not a strong point, but my point is what you do is going to change. That's just the nature of the market we live in. Like you're going to be all sorts of things, but the question is, who are you going to be in those roles? And you've got to figure out, who am I going to be? Because you may be in IT and the next thing God says, I want you to go start working, I don't know, working in the prison system or something, something bizarre. It's like, what?
Yeah,
or he may call you to be a missionary to somewhere, or he may call you to go into customer service. And he said, what you do, and that's where the problem is when with so many guys I work with in my coaching program, they've gotten their identity from what they've done. And all of a sudden retirement is looming, or the industry changes and they're irrelevant anymore. And they're devastated. Their life is over because their whole identity is wrapped up in what I'm doing. So what I would say for your business as an entrepreneur is, what are you going to be? It may be selling real estate, that you are what you do, that you become figure out who you're going to be and what's going to drive what you do. And it may be real estate right now. A few years from now, it maybe you get into something different. But the core of who you are is not going to change. As the verse that says, the gifts and the calling of God are without repentance. He doesn't take back what he's put in you. He likes what he put in you. It's there for a reason. So figure out what that is and operate out of that. And that seems so zen and esoteric, but it's really true, because I've had 52 different job titles over the last 25 years.
Wow.
But through each of those, I've learned a little bit more about who I am. But here's the thing, there's a driving force behind it.
Yes.
My message is this: vision, perspective, purpose, and adventure. Everything I've ever done has come back to that. Wow. Vision, perspective, adventure, and purpose. And my next book is actually about perspective. The one I'm literally just wrapping it up right now to send off to the publisher. And perspective. And the funny thing is, when I started the Outdoor Adventures 25 years ago, perspective was my driving force too. And it comes back. It's those circles that come back around. So figure out what those are and then drive what you do from that and who you are.
Thank you, Joel. Even if you've had different titles, you were being attentive, you were paying attention, like, okay, I really have to understand, picking out, we call it discernment. Like, okay, I'm good with this. And then if we go back a little bit now, when you got to the point of a book, you were like, okay, this is not really speaking to me, right? Because you knew what you really wanted that story to be. It wasn't just, let's just let's just continue using somebody's, but you were diligent and wanted to be excellence with it. Like, okay, you know what? I need to find the right book. And since there is none out there, I have to just write it and come up with it. But yeah, that's good. So speaking of books, your latest book is Love Slows Down. Give our listeners and viewers an overview of what they can expect to glean from that book.
So the book is about how to make sure that you're not letting anxiety and anger mess up your world. So we're all driven by three core drives. One of them is a need for security. One of them is a need for connection with others. And another one is a need for a sense of control. If you see in the Garden of Eden, God gave us all of that. Again, he was like, yes to everything. Just don't do one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we walked with God in the garden, it says. Let's talk about connection.
Bro.
It'd be nice to know God was going to show up every afternoon and chat with you.
Come on now.
So we had it all.
Yeah.
When we lost it, the first emotion you see is fear. And fear is the primal emotion. Call it anxiety, call it fear, call it whatever. Whenever you feel anxiety, it's because you feel a threat to your sense of security, connection, or control. And those things can drive you. When you're driven by fear, it shrinks your world. And I mean, you see this with anybody that's a leader. You've seen fear-driven leaders, and when it's like, well, batten down the hatches because it's about to get bad. And then you see other leaders, they're right in the middle of the chaos. They're charging forward, and you go, what are they thinking? Well, what it is they're not being driven by fear. So fear is a primal emotion. Then fear that's not resolved eventually turns to anger. And we're talking deep-seated anger, but anytime you feel angry, it's because you feel a threat to your sense of security, connection, or control. And when you figure out what that sensitive point is for you, then you become more aware, you become a little more emotionally intelligent. You know a little bit more about who you are, which is one of the keys. If you're a leader of organizations, you have got to know yourself. And you say, well, that seems so self-serving. No, it'll help us, please, because nothing's worse than a leader who is out of touch with even themselves.
Yeah.
They run people over, they abuse people. So you need to become emotionally aware and know yourself a little bit. So that's what the book is about, getting to know a little bit more the drives behind why you're making the decisions you're making, and then how to conquer that, how to conquer the fear and how to conquer the anxiety. So it's a book for anybody. I tell pastors, a lot of pastors and leaders, I'm like, this is a really helpful book for you to walk your staff through, because when you're working together, man, there are just certain people that they just rub you the wrong way. And typically it's because they're poking at one sensitive, it's that security or the connection or the control they're poking at that you're sensitive to. And every time they make you mad, it's because they've just poked at that. You're like, ugh. So that's what the book is about.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. And where can listeners get that? Like everywhere, right?
Anywhere books sold. All of my books are available on audiobook. So you can get the Audible, audiobooks.com, or, and they're available anywhere books are sold. So Barnes & Noble, Amazon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Audiobook. I think they actually came out with a CD audiobook of Love Slow Down. I was like, does anybody still use CDs? But it's out there. So yeah.
So that you have no reasons not to be able to find it. You if you're looking for it, you'll find it.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So is there anything additional you'd like to share before we conclude our time together here?
I would just say, in terms of the plant, cultivate, grow.
Yes.
Really do stay focused on the long game, because if you can stay focused on the long game, when those little discouraging things come that you're just like, this is not taking off. And listen, sometimes if something's not taking off for a long time, you need to regroup and try something else. Trust me, I'm exhibit A of that. I've learned, hey, that didn't work, but man, this over here really took off. And I like doing that. So go for that. Don't be so. In the book, Love Slows Down, I talk about how we sometimes, as a kid, I used to use toilet paper rolls. I'd pretend they were binoculars. Yeah. And it didn't really improve any of my vision, but it was fun to play. And sometimes we get these toilet paper rolls over our eyes, and it actually causes us to block out opportunities that are around us, because we're like, this is the way it must be. It must be this way. And God's like, no.
Take this off.
Open up your vision here and let me show you what it's supposed to be. So, but think for the long game and prepare for the long game, and know that it's going to take some time. There are no overnight success stories, but if you'll keep planting, I mean, one of the most consistent things, people see these mega churches that pop up, but if you look at the statistics, the number one consistent statistic of what makes for a mega church is longevity in the pastor. And if you look at Lakewood Church, you have a legacy of leadership from John passed on to Joe. You're looking at 60, is it 60 years? I think they've been around
now.
Plus, yeah. You're looking at 60 years. That didn't happen overnight. Seeds were planted years ago by John. Joel carried those on. And the same is true for you. And here's the thing. You may be planting something right now and it never gets to the point you want it to go. But here's the thing. Your kids may be the ones that carry it on. Somebody else may be the one. So you may be the one that plants the seed. But that's where something you talked about earlier, Remy, you said, we're living for something, a different perspective. We're living for an eternal goal. And we're serving an audience of one here. And we may never see the results on earth that we want. But when we stand before God and he says, well done, good and faithful servant, you may never see the results ultimately of what happened, but there's one guy that does. And he's the only one's approval you need anyway. So stay faithful, think long-term, and recognize God. He's a long-term God.
I have a close friend. She's one of the leaders with the business ministry too, and she was just featured in the Houston Business Journal. And he was talking about how she came and took over her dad's business. The dad spent years in it. And when you speak about legacy, even with me, sometimes in my quiet time, I struggle with certain things, and the Holy Spirit is like, at some point, you have to understand that some of these Eliana would inherit. Eliana would benefit from it. So it takes my mind off of, I want to see it now and just understand that, like you said, with that plant, cultivate, grow. I may plant, I may cultivate, and Eliana grows it.
Yeah.
I may plant, cultivate, and grow, and she harvest it, right? So yeah, thank you so much for saying that. That was so good. That blessed me. How can people connect with you and learn more about your business and your books?
joelmalm.com, JOELMALM.com. If you want to sign up for my Monday little encouragement email, you just text my name, JOELMALM, as the message to the number 44222. It'll say, please enter your email, and you can reply to that. Amazon has all my books. And then we've got everything's pretty much on Joël Malm. The podcast that I do, the books, and a bunch of messages I've shared around the country are on there too.
So. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this, brother. We appreciate you taking the time to just pour into the viewers and listeners about planting, cultivating, and growing. All about the long game.
That's right. I love it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, bro.